Welcome. Over the past couple of months, you've been visiting this website, hopefully, and you've come across a wide variety of videos on what exactly has changed with specific content in the newly revised Michigan content expectations. This month, we're going to focus in on what's new with United States history at the 5th grade level, the 8th grade level, and the high school level. To do that, I am joined by my special guest for this month, Miss Rebecca Bush from Ottawa Area Intermediate School District, who is one of the chairs of the United States History Update team. And she's going to tell us a little bit about what's new and different. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Dave. At Ottawa Area ISD, I'm responsible for working with several of our districts. We also have some school districts that weren't originally part of the ISD, but have kind of joined our professional learning. So our radius is expanding, and we're excited about that.
That's awesome.
It is awesome.
So you ended up as one of the chairs of the United States History team.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I noticed in going over the 2007 standards versus the 2019 standards is that at those three grade levels, 5th grade, 8th grade, and high school, it doesn't appear that the number of standards has grown or shrunk considerably. So if that's the case, what exactly did change with U.S. history?
Most of the changes that we see at all three of the grade levels are pretty subtle. For example, we see changes in terminology at the 5th grade level. For example, instead of using the term Native Americans, we use the term Indigenous peoples. And we've kept that consistent throughout all of the standards. So for example, in 3rd grade, Indigenous peoples is used as well. Those are most of the significant changes. The course focus at each of those levels didn't change. And we're still addressing the same time periods that were in the 2007 standards. So there shouldn't need to be add-ons, if you will, if you think about it from a unit standpoint. Teachers probably are going to take a look at the terminology changes and the focus of each of the standards, and maybe not even have to change their units of instruction at all from a content standpoint.
From a content standpoint, and we'll get to the other major shift in just a couple of minutes here.
Okay.
One thing that did stick out to me when I was looking at all of the standards, there's 4 standards where there used to be 3 in the progressive era in high school U.S. history.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 3 standards in that vein seem to have been completely rewritten from their 2007 counterparts. Can you tell us a little bit about what they're asking for now and how that decision was made?
Sure. That decision came out of many discussions with the most recent task force that we had taking a look at the 5th, 8th, and high school courses. And in those discussions, it really became apparent that the original wording of those standards, the 2007 version, there really wasn't a lot of an analysis of cause and effect. And we know that cause and effect is a large part of the study of history during any time period. So for example, in the 2007 standards, the first content expectation around the progressive era asks for students to be able to list 3 significant problems or issues of the progressive era. And again, that's really a list without any opportunity for teachers to work with cause and effect. And okay, so we can list 3 problems or issues during that time period, then what? And so the new focus really changed the area of inquiry, if you will. So instead of asking students to list 3 issues of the progressive era, for example, we really focus on the extent to which industrialization and urbanization created some of those issues. So how did they come into being in the first place instead of here they are? Much more of a synthesis about the variables that kind of came into play. The second, content expectation, really kind of takes a what we call spec approach. It's more inclusive. We want students to be able to think about the social, the political, the economic, and the cultural changes that occurred during this time period. What did industrialization and urbanization lead to? Not just from a problem standpoint, but what were some of the changes? What were some of the measures of progress that occurred during that time period as well? And so the other piece of that, obviously, then, if we follow cause and effect all the way through, what are some of the consequences of not just the issues or problems, but the actions that were taken during that era? And so there's really kind of a focus on following that all the way through, whereas before there wasn't.
And I think other grade levels have utilized that spec lens to look at what's going on in specific time periods as well. I think I saw it creep up in 8th grade, and I think I saw it creep up in some of the other high school and middle school courses as well. So
it does. And again, that is a strategy that we want students to be employing, not just with U.S. history, but as they study world history as well. Because it is been shown to be an effective organizational way of thinking, a great tool. If we think about expanding their knowledge, and if we really get into the art of inquiry, we want students to be able to break down issues. And if they already have a technique for organization in their thinking, then that's more likely to come through in their writing or in their speaking.
well, that certainly makes sense, and it's good that that's employed throughout multiple grade levels as well, that opportunity. So let's talk for a minute about structure. The number of standards didn't really change between those 3 grade levels. We've already talked a little bit about that, but the page length is a little bit longer for each of those courses than it was in the 2007 standards. And that growth seems to be attached a little bit to how the expectations are structured. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. You're right in that at first glance, we don't see a huge number of substantial changes, right? Either in number or in layout. But what we do see that can be deceiving is that the examples are placed in a different spot on the paper. So instead of the examples being placed in parentheticals within the standard or expectation itself, they're now listed underneath.
So all of the teams worked really diligently, and I think you sort of referenced some call-outs to some of this in your answers to a few of the previous questions, but all of the teams worked diligently with outside groups to ensure a large amount of inclusion when possible in a standard, and when not possible within a standard, within the examples that were listed for each one. And this includes a broad swath of topics. It could be people, it could be places, it could be events, it could be specific eras. So what does this look like in U.S. history? What did that inclusion look like in the U.S. history courses?
I think it really expanded the depth of some of these key pivotal moments in our nation's history. For example, if you take a look at the civil rights movement, whereas before we had several examples of groups of people, now we also have specific legislative actions, and we have certain people listed as well. Some people are listed are those that may not automatically come to someone's mind just because they aren't widely known at a national level. We have several Michigan examples included that weren't included before. Not that they were not taught before, but there's more of an emphasis on Michigan's role in all of these national events and what it looks like from a Michigan lens. Often our students get a version of Michigan studies at the third grade level and sometimes the fourth grade level, and often they don't really feel like they're going back to Michigan history there on out in their social studies courses. And so we tried to weave that in at the 8th grade level. For example, Michigan's role in the Civil War, we're hoping will be more pronounced. Likewise, Michigan's role in some of these other national events during various time periods of our nation's history. So we really tried to be inclusive of that and emphasize kind of that dual lens, if you will, as students are studying U.S. history.
So, with there not being a huge change in the number of content expectations for those 3 grade levels, and with the expansion of the possible teachable examples that would happen in a classroom, tell us a little bit about the role of inquiry in the U.S. history classroom.
The role of inquiry has taken a huge jump as far as the level of importance. It used to be that we would take a look at the expectations and right away you could identify the content that was to be taught. And what many have realized is that just focusing on the specific content that is listed is really not helping students examine from an inquiry lens. And so they're not questioning as much as we would like them to be. And so the role of inquiry becomes extremely important. This is where you have to get out your copy of the C3 framework and take a look at the arc of inquiry and how the C3 framework is designed around the arc of inquiry, how it's extremely important to present information to students in a way that catches their interest, that kind of hooks them in to wanting to learn more about a time period or a series of events or a certain person and their contribution or cause and effect of groups of people during a specific time period. Inquiry allows us to do that, to get students hooked so that they're not just memorizing information and regurgitating it. And so the other skills that we want students to also bring to the table along with the content knowledge that they are going to be learning as laid out in the standards, we also want students to be questioning sources. We want students to be observing and appreciating perspectives. And so all of those skills that we want students to practice really come into play if we set our study up from the very beginning through an inquiry lens. And so the way that the standards are written allows that to happen in a much easier, more natural way than before.
Well, I know in the coming months, the videos on this website are going to transition from what's new with specific content in the content expectations towards C3, the C3 framework, and how you teach it alongside the newly revised standards. So stay tuned, there's more coming on that. But I, for one, would really like to thank you for your time today, explaining to the state of Michigan exactly what's new with Michigan's U.S. history standards.
Thank you for having me.
So you are welcome to come back here again next month, where we will dive deeper into yet another grade band of what's changed with Michigan's expectations, and continue to look at the reference documents here on this website, misocialstudies.org, and we will see you back here next month.